Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the, what day is today? June 5th, 2012 meeting of the Board of Finance. If you can please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you, everyone. We have a couple of members who are going to be here but are running late due to various school functions. Mr. Flynn will be late, Mrs. LeClaire will be late, and Mr. Stone will be late, so we will have a full complement at some point tonight. So why don't we take it from the top? Item number 1 on the agenda. We have a whole boatload of minutes to go through here. Item 1 is to approve the minutes of the following meetings: January 25th, February 7th, February 16th, February 28th, March 1st, March 6th, March 8th, 12th, 14th, 20th, 28th, 29th, and the May 9th meeting. Now, unfortunately, we're going to have to do all of these individually because some members were absent for different meetings, so if anyone was absent for a particular meeting, and I'll tip you off as to which ones you were for, you're going to have to abstain. So we'll take it from the top with the January 25th meeting. And everyone was actually present for that one. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Mr. Brockfeld, seconded by Mr. DeWitt. Any discussion on those minutes? Nope. All in favor? All opposed? Abstentions? That passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
A friendly suggestion to
Absolutely.
the chair? Could you look at your list here and see in aggregate which ones everybody was at? And then we can
that's a good point.
make a
Thank you.
motion to pass them in
Certainly can.
unison?
I think I was.
There was a missing person at many of them.
Was it? Well,
Yeah,
that
that's what
doesn't-
I'm thinking,
Not
but
everyone, but many.
Yeah, if that doesn't fly, then ignore my suggestion.
that's okay.
Oh, I was on that one.
Yeah, you know, why don't we go through them one by one? I could probably knock them off quicker that
Okay,
way.
go
But thank
on.
you for the suggestion, Mr. Brockfeld.
problem.
All right. February 7th, Mr. Flynn was absent for that one. So do I have a motion to accept those minutes? Mr. DeWitt, seconded by Mr. Brown. Any discussion? All right, all in favor of approving the minutes from the February 7th meeting? Opposed? Abstentions? That passes unanimously. Okay. February 16th. Okay, that one Mr. DeWitt was absent for, so he'll be abstaining on this one. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from February 16th? Mr. Brockfeld, seconded by Mrs. LeClaire. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? So that carries 5-0, 1 abstention. Moving right along to February 28th. That one Mr. DeWitt was absent for, so he'll be abstaining on this one. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for February 28th?
So moved.
Mr. Kiley, seconded by Mrs. LeClaire. Any discussion? All in favor? Mr. Brockfeld? Okay.
Yes.
Opposed? Abstentions? So that carries 5-0, 1. All right, moving on, March 1st. That one, Mr. Brown and Mr. DeWitt were absent for, so they'll be abstaining on this one. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for March 1st? Mrs. LeClaire, seconded by Mr. Brockfeld. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? So that one carries 4-0, 2. All right, March 6th. That one, Mr. Flynn was absent for. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes for March 6th? Mr. DeWitt, seconded by Mr. Kiley. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? All right, that passes unanimously. Okay, March 8th. Good evening. How you doing?
Continue, please.
March 8th, actually, everybody was here. So Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for March 8th? Mr. Brockfeld, seconded by Mrs. Leclerc. Any discussion? All in favor of approving those minutes? Opposed? Abstentions? All right, that passes unanimously. Do you want me to just keep going through this, Tom, or?
Please.
Okay. Don't blame you one bit. All right, March 12th. Boy, we did a lot of work in March, didn't we? March 12th, Ms. Gaffney was absent from that meeting. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes for March 12th? Mr. DeWitt, seconded by Mr. Brown. Any discussion? Mr. Brockfeld?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was voting.
Okay, that's okay. Step ahead of me there. All right, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That passes unanimously. March 14th. It's like reliving a month of our life here. All right, that one everyone was present for. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes for March 14th? Mr. Brockfeld, seconded Mr. DeWitt. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That passes unanimously. Onward and upward. March 20th. All right, everybody was here for that one. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes for March 20th? Mr. DeWitt, seconded by Mr. Kiley. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Against? Abstentions? All right, that passes unanimously. Almost done here, guys. March 28th. Mr. DeWitt and Mr. Kiley were absent for that one. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes for March 28th? Mrs. Leclerc, seconded by Mr. Brown. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? All right, so that passes 6-0-2. Am I counting right? I think so.
Yes.
Okay. All right. March 29th. Everyone was here for that one. So I have a motion to approve the minutes for March 29th.
So motion.
Mr. Kiley?
502, only have 7 of us.
Okay, I'm sorry. 502. Thank you, Mr. DeWitt.
Math isn't your strong suit.
No, that's why I went into law, Tom. All right, seconded by Mrs. Leclerc. Do I have any discussion on the 29th minutes? Nope. All right, do I vote?
Motion.
Oh, we need a motion, right. Thank you, Mr. DeWitt, seconded by,
Stone's not here. That's
thought we did that already, but okay. Mr. Brown. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That passes unanimously. Finally, May 9th. There we go. Yeah, that was a fun meeting. All right. Absent was Elaine Gaffney, so everyone else was there. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for the May 9th meeting? Mr. Brockfeld, second, and Mr. Flynn. Any discussion? All right. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That passes 7-0. Did I get that right? All right, we're done with the minutes. That takes care of items 1 and 2. I'll hand it over to Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Bellitto. Now you can accuse me of slowing down the meeting.
Mr. Flynn, can I just point
We were on
out, if
record
you don't
pace.
mind, how quickly the vice chairman went through an entire page
Exactly,
of
thank
the
you.
agenda? Just wanted to...
My apologies for my tardiness. I was actually at a school function for one of my sons. Mrs. Gaffney did notify the chair earlier today that she has a business conflict this evening. And Mrs. Leclerc, glad you're here. I know you also had a conflict with a children's event, so I'm glad you were able to make it prior to me getting here even. Item number 3 on the agenda is to hear, consider, and act upon a request from the tax collector to transfer taxes receivable to a suspense account in accordance with Section 12165 of Connecticut General Statutes. Mr. Hiller, are you going to address this item? Hello.
Pass out, also take the opportunity, some of you have had the opportunity, either personally or during the budget dialogue, to meet our new tax collector.
How are you?
Good evening, how are you?
Cinda
Nice to meet
Buchter, who joined us full-time 4 weeks ago, and
Thank you.
I previously was the tax collector in Derby and also the tax collector in Bethany.
In where?
Bethany,
Beth.
which is
Yeah,
very
I'll make the formal introduction.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. You're jumping. Cinda joined us on a full-time basis May 7th, had worked on a part-time basis in the transition during the month of April, and we're very pleased that she's with us. As she's just mentioned, she has served 10 years, or a little less than that, I think. About
19 years I've been in the business.
been in the business 19 years, and first in her hometown of Bethany, and then most recently as the tax collector for the town of Derby, and has joined us, and she is also the president-elect of the Connecticut Tax Collectors Association. So comes with great credentials, and we're there. I think the one thing that I would like to address briefly, and we can get into the tax matter. You all received a set of various documents which are many accounts which have very, very small balances. Tax office this past week mailed out our lien notices, which were mailed on Friday, received by most taxpayers on Saturday, and we had some, shall I say, bumps in the road on this process. We'll get into it a little more, Cinda can get into it a little more as to what we're recommending tonight, along with the annual suspense listing of, to put various accounts, predominantly motor vehicle accounts, into the suspense accounts. Obviously, we will continue to pursue these people, primarily through the collection agency, which the tax collector's office utilizes. And we have, I can't say we have no success. We have some success in collecting these over an extended period of time. So the mere fact that you put them in suspense becomes more a legal and accounting issue as opposed to our inability at this point in time to not, well, we are pursuing these people and will continue to pursue these people. But the good news is it is not a significant amount of money on that main list. The other list that we have comes in 5 categories: motor vehicle, supplemental motor vehicle, personal property, real estate, and sewer use fees. And these are accounts that are more than nominal, starting at a penny and going up to under $2. So with that, I will turn it over to Cinda, who will explain what we propose before you this evening.
Okay, excuse the coughing. Those are allergies. One of the things is we have a new software in the tax office, and we have already taken steps so that we will not have these issues in the future. Excuse me, but what has happened in the past is because of the installments that you offer, often the tax bills do not divide into 4 installments equally for real estate or 2 installments equally for motor vehicle. Quite a few people, when they pay their 2nd or 3rd or 4th installment, don't necessarily look at the bill. They write a check in the same amount that they wrote the check previously. This leaves a very small amount on the account. And my proposal is to put those small amounts on suspense right now, so that nothing in the future will go out to them as a delinquent notice for a penny, or for 6 cents, or for 9 cents, whatever these small balances are. They are all under, excuse me, they're all under $2. And I did an Excel spreadsheet so that you would know what grand list years they are and what types they are and how many of those accounts. I ran reports this afternoon that reflect these parameters so we know exactly how much money we're talking about.
Do we have copies of that?
Yes, I made 15 copies.
I don't see that.
I think they were up
I
there.
don't see that.
All the ones we have are
Excuse me.
the below $2.
Well, thank you.
We have lists, we don't have a spreadsheet.
Okay. The lists are of the 2005 grand list for motor vehicle supplement, and personal property.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hill.
Thanks, Paul.
Rach?
The figures on the right of your spreadsheet represent the 2005 personal property, motor vehicle supplemental accounts that I'm requesting to be transferred to the suspense list. I have known your previous tax collector for all 19 years, and I am following in the way he did the suspense in previous years. So the last year, he suspended 2004 grand list. So, which is why that's the 2005.
Questions from board members? Mr. Brockfeld?
Thanks. And welcome.
Thank you.
Formally, we met you earlier, but a suggestion that maybe you thought of already, but it just came to me as I was listening, and to piggyback on what you were saying, is to maybe avoid this in the future, is if a lot of these minor, $1 or 48 cents payments are because of what you described, if we could recode our software or reprogram it slightly so that if there's going to be 2 payments or 4 payments, if the first payment always was the highest of the split, then this problem would never happen. Because if the people automatically write the same check thereafter, then they'll end up actually overpaying by a couple of pennies rather than underpaying, and we'll have a happy problem rather than a unhappy problem, even though the numbers are not big in either case.
Right. What most municipalities do for anything that is more than one installment, it's called rounding, so that if it's an uneven number, they make it an even number, so all installments are exactly the same
Well, that would
amount.
work, too.
And that's
And you
what,
can do that. That's legal
We're
to do.
going to do it.
You're going to do that.
On the bills, will be going out later this month.
right, so that's already been put into effect for the bills that are going to be
Great, thank you.
issued.
As you can see on this spreadsheet, if you look particularly at the
I'm
last
having a
several
hard time,
years,
yeah, I'm having a hard time following it, Paul. Can you guys
Sorry?
walk us? I'm having a hard time following the spreadsheet. Can you walk us through it? Because there,
all right, what, historically, on this evening or in the springtime, we've come in with a suspense list for a particular year. That list is primarily the 2005 assessment year, which totals just over $80,000.
how, but you're not answering the question. How does the spreadsheet work?
Okay, the spreadsheet, I did this before I came. The spreadsheet has a grand list for each grand list year that I found accounts that had these small balances of under $2.
Right.
So there's some years that are not listed. And in 2001, the only accounts that are not on suspense now, that had they each had a penny balance. There were 2 real estate accounts, and the total was 2 cents off of 2 accounts.
What is,
Same.
yeah, bring me to 2005, because,
Okay.
yeah.
The 2005, the first set of the first column, is the personal property, I had 5 accounts that totaled $1.13.
Okay,
And then there are 39 accounts that have already gone through the collection efforts of the office and have not been paid as of right now.
okay, so, thank you. So, the left side of the page excuse me, are really the dribs and drabs, the rounding
Right.
errors, the scenario that you talked about. The right side, which is significantly more dollars, those are actually what you would refer to as bad debts, or those are delinquent taxes.
Delinquent taxes that are uncollectible through the normal procedures in the office. 2005 are traditionally due in July of 2006. That gives us 6 years' worth of collection effort on those particular accounts. This is how your suspense lists were done in the past.
Right.
And I just decided, because I'm new, and
Right.
trying to follow the protocol that Fairfield has taken.
Okay. So, all right, so then if we take, you're saying, here's all the dribs and drabs for the last 6 years, that grand total of $887. You add that to the 2005 more significant debts, bad debts, at this point, of 81,104, and then your proposed transfer to suspense is 81,991. That's how the schedule reads, right?
Correct.
Okay. Can you just remind the board the more significant items that are on the right-hand side related to 2005? Let's forget about, what we're talking about here is an accounting transfer. What efforts now are underway with those accounts? What happens from this point forward?
The personal property, motor vehicle, and motor vehicle supplement.
Yeah.
Most of those are already in with a collection agency
Okay.
that have had limited success with finding the individuals. And some of them may truly be uncollectible. I was unable to tell through reports of your former administrative software whether they were bankrupt accounts. Some of them could be deceased taxpayers. So there's a variety of reasons why they may be uncollectible. If at some point we have new information, or someone, say, moves back to Fairfield, and that information becomes available to where they are, we certainly can go after those accounts. They do not go away. They're still collectible by law for 15 years. This is just being upfront in the accounting aspect, saying that you really don't want your tax office to spend a significant amount of time, nor do you want to continue to mail things if you don't have a good address. That's not being responsible with the,
Resources.
right, the postage and
Yeah.
the people in the office, correct.
Sure. Mr. Brockfeld?
Can I just follow up on, and by the way, everything you said from a financial point of view makes perfect sense, so at the end of the day, I'm going to agree with you. But having said that, since we do have more sophisticated software and we have new programs and so forth now, can you say to me with any certainty that out of the 1,119 motor vehicle, for example, uncollectible accounts, which admittedly only add up to about $70 each on average, I assume some are higher, some are lower, can you say with any certainty that none of those people still live in Fairfield in their homes? Paul's not saying no.
Well, I did run a comparison to see if they had bills in the system currently. And some of them do, but they seem to have, none of those are paid either. And I can't tell from your previous software whether those are things that have been mail returned and not been,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
if they had tax bills after 2005, none of them are paid, because by state statute, had any payments come to the tax office, they would have been applied to those oldest bills first.
So it is possible, well, not really. So I'm just trying to get a handle on whether or not it's possible that someone could be living in town, enjoying the services of the town, and even though the numbers might be small, not paying their bill. That's what I'm trying to get at.
If, with all of these tax bills for motor vehicle, they are reported to the Department of Motor Vehicle on a regular basis, and people cannot register their cars. The one scenario that I will tell you that does not stop them from registering a car is if they have a leased vehicle. Now, sometimes those turn up, but we as an association are trying to work with the leasing companies, and now a lot of the leasing companies, instead of leasing, when they lease a car, it doesn't necessarily go under Toyota or Nissan. It is now showing the person who's leasing it, who leases it, their name. That's something that we're working with the leasing companies to try to eliminate these kind of issues.
And then my last question would be, why is it in 2005 there's no real estate line, and every other year there is?
The 2005 real estate didn't happen to have any of the small unpaid balances
Okay.
that I found. I did this by running a report that I put the parameters in from 1 penny to $1.99. There might be some that have $2.19, but I was sticking with a parameter of under $2.
For 2005? But the average for, maybe, again, I apologize, and
That's
again,
okay.
I mean, getting into the weeds on isn't that important, but the average on the right-hand column for the property, vehicle, and supplemental are significantly higher than $2 or $1. So why wouldn't we be searching for any real estate?
We basically did, there's two files here, essentially. And there's the file which has 1,975 names, which were the ones that are under $2,
Right.
which all receive statements on them. We're just trying to, frankly, get them off the books. It's costing us more to keep them here
Right.
than we'd ever collect if we got 100 cents on the dollar. What Mrs. Buchter is saying is that in the 2005 list, which is annually, which is our target this year, there were no small real estate bills. And the other bills, which are deemed uncollectible at this time, are higher. It's not a
Oh, so you're saying, I see what you're saying. So you're saying there are no real estate bills that you want to move to a suspense account? But there
That's
could be real estate bills that we're still trying to collect on?
Real estate traditionally is not put on suspense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Real estate is usually collected regardless.
Right.
What I'm trying to eliminate is someone getting a lien on their property that only owes 6 cents. We're trying to clean the file, and with this new software, we have more ability to single them out. And so those are the issues that I'm starting to address now.
Mr. DeWitt?
Good evening.
Hi.
So we don't have the same system in place that motor vehicle does, where when you pay your motor vehicle taxes, it pays your last year's in full for real estate. Because that would eliminate the problem of having a 2-cent, from 2005, a 2-cent overrun by paying my 2012 property taxes.
Correct.
Why couldn't we do that?
You might, okay, you would have been able to do that, and I'm speaking hypothetically because obviously I was not here. My best professional guess would be that with the amount of payments that are received in July, October, January, and April, they were unable, when they were taking their payments at the counter, to inquire on the property. That had to be a separate transaction done at another terminal. So when they were taking the payment or processing the payment, there was nothing that was flagging them to tell them that there was a balance of a penny or 2 cents.
Okay.
So.
The system isn't smart enough to say, oh, Chris DeWitt underpaid last year by 2 cents, let's tack 2 cents on his bill this year.
The new system does.
Oh,
The new system will automatically, every account is flagged that owes taxes from a previous year.
Oh, so that's good
And
news.
when it's brought up to be paid, it will tell whoever is processing it that there are back taxes due.
I can personally attest to this, and Mr. Kiley is my witness. Yesterday, I spent virtually all day in the tax office because of staffing issues there. And the system, it was my first time, and the system is very user-friendly. And the system has the capability, as Mrs. Buchter has just said, to see the back years on the thing, which the previous system, as I described as obsolete, did not have. And so if you came in to pay one car tax, that's all they were seeing. Now, if, once your name pops up, whether it's real estate, sewer use, car tax, whatever, it's all there. The full menu is there. And so we have that capacity now. And that's been in place, but only roughly for the last 7 weeks or so.
Correct.
Great. That's good news. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? So what is our collection rate on the antiquated system was what?
Last year, we were around 98.9.
Pretty good on an antiquated
Pretty
system.
good, yeah. To the credit of the taxpayers of Fairfield and to the efforts of the tax collector's office. But I think with the new system, we're going to get a lot more pennies in time. And I think the good news also is, as you can see, that the amount we're asking to be transferred to suspense is some $50,000 lower than we're in excess of 50,000 less than it was last year. And so that's an indication that collection efforts are paying off. We continue to pursue people through the collection agency and have limited success with that, but nonetheless, some successes.
Thank you. Any other questions from board members? Seeing none, we'll go to the public on this item. Any questions, comments from the public? None, will come back to the board. So the item before us is to transfer, and on the agenda, the amount was not filled in because you were still calculating.
That's correct.
So it's to act upon a request from the tax collector to transfer taxes receivable in the amount of $81,991.19 to the suspense account in accordance with Section 12165 of the Connecticut General Statutes. That item is before us. All in favor? Those opposed? Abstentions? We're good here. Thank you. Welcome. Best of luck in the new position.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good luck with all the pennies and dimes, and
We'll get it cleaned up.
please keep Mr. Hiller out of the tax department. That can't be a good thing.
It was a formidable presence, I can tell you. That and the policeman.
Thank you.
That was with
Thank you. All right. Item number 4 is now before us. To hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Director of Public Works for an appropriation of $210,000 from the Water Pollution Control Authority Reserve Fund to provide the town's local share for an energy reduction project at the treatment plant. Furthermore, the first selectman is authorized to execute any necessary agreements with the United Illuminating Company to obtain grants and interest-free loans related to such project. Good evening, Mr.
Good
White.
evening. The project involves replacing one of the 200 horsepower blowers that supplies process air to the tanks at the treatment plant with an energy-efficient 150 horsepower variable speed blower. The total cost of the project is $481,000. As you stated, the town's share is $210,000, and the remainder will be funded by the United Illuminating Company's Energy Reduction Program, which will provide a grant of $171,000 plus an interest-free loan of $100,000 over 36 months. The interest-free loan will be paid back by the projected savings of $103,000 per year. The simple payback is equal to 3 years on the project, simply taking our local share of $210,000 plus the loan of $100,000 equals 310 divided by the savings of 103,000. The current WPCA reserve is slightly over $2 million. We did a similar project to this 2 years ago, which was very successful, so we're very confident in the projected savings. So I'll answer any of your questions.
Mr. Bellitto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. White. The savings amount to $103,000 per year. Obviously, the first 3 years it's going to be used, those savings will be used to pay back the interest-free loan. So am I then to assume that after that loan is paid off, we will continue to save $103,000 with this new
Yes.
blower?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I need to know. Thank you.
Any other questions? How is the $103,000 in savings calculated? That's what I'm,
We had, based on the projected use of this blower versus the other one, which is a higher horsepower, we can calculate the actual kilowatt per hour savings, and they equal 670,000 a year, and we're paying 15.4 cents per kWh. It's not simply taking the difference between the 150 horsepower and the 200 horsepower. It's a little more complicated in the sense that this variable speed blower is able to match the demand that we need better, where the other one is more of a fixed output. So you could turn this one down when you only needed 75 horsepower, where the other one would stay at the 200 horsepower.
and that's factored into the 103, or could the 103 savings actually be higher?
It could be higher. I think this is a conservative estimate. Again, we did a similar project 2 years ago, a little different horsepower combination, but that was very successful.
Well, when you say very successful, do you remember what you thought you would save and how much you ended up saving?
I believe on that project was different configuration. We were actually replacing a 200 horsepower with a 300 horsepower blower, which at first glance doesn't seem to make sense. But
Right.
again, it has to do with matching the curve of the demand with the output of the blower better. And I believe we were in the $150,000 per year savings, and we're easily on the other side of 180,000. So it's,
Okay.
again, these are what we consider to be very conservative estimates. It's a good project.
Thank you. Mrs. Leclerc, did you have a question? Please.
Will we keep the old blower as a backup, or will we try to sell that to?
No, exactly, it'll stay as a back. It's 2002, so about 10 years old, and it just simply gets slid to the side and stays as a backup to one of the other 200 horsepower if they were to get out.
Okay. Can I ask one more question?
Absolutely.
And is there any risk that we won't get the grant and the loan, or are they guaranteed at this point that we're eligible for them?
It's locked in with respect to an agreement with UI at this point in time, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bellitto?
Thank you. Sorry, one other thing I had to ask about was, this is essentially a transfer from an existing fund, correct? This is appropriation from the WPCA's reserve fund.
Correct.
So this is not new money, it's not new taxpayer dollars.
Correct.
It's money that's already there. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Brockville?
Just a question that comes to mind. It sounds like about as good a project as could be imagined in terms of payback. Are there more of these opportunities around town where we can,
Yeah.
I mean, any project where you can get payback in 3 years or less and then continue to save money going forward would be something.
Right, no,
Pursue.
again, the credit goes to Ed Bowman, my assistant, who has continually chased the grants, and in this program in particular, the UI combination grant interest-free loan program, he's put together over $1 million worth of projects and is still pursuing them. So he looks for every opportunity we can with them.
Is the limitation the finding worthy projects, or is the limitation getting grants?
No, they do cap a certain amount for the town, on the town side, and he tries to fill that, get the maximum amount he can from the program.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Stone, anything? All right, any questions or comments from the public? Mr. Tetra, do you have anything you'd like to say on this item? Not at this time. Okay. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll come back to the board. Any follow-ups on this? All right. Item number 4 is now before us to hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Director of Public Works for an appropriation of $210,000 from the WPCA Reserve Fund to provide the town's local share for an energy reduction project at the treatment plant. Furthermore, the First Selectman is authorized to execute any necessary agreements with the United Illuminating Company to obtain these grants and interest-free loans related to the project. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries.
Thank you.
you, sir. We'll see you next time, Mr. White. Thanks. All right. Another item, number 5, is now before us. This was also tabled from our May 9th meeting. This item is to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution requested by the Riverfield School Building Committee. Resolved that the bond appropriation entitled a resolution appropriating $250,000 for the costs associated with the improvement and renovation of Riverfield Elementary School and authorizing the issuance of bonds to fund such appropriation consisting of 3 pages, be and hereby is approved. So the item is now before us. Good evening.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, before Mr. Quinn gets up here, in the call for the meeting, the material that was attached inadvertently was for the Osborne Hill
Yeah, I was
window
wondering
project.
about that.
And I am distributing, as we speak, copies of the Riverfield School Building Committee, the committee charge, and also the educational specifications as adopted by the Board of Education for the Riverfield building project. I have
If you
additional copies if the public wants any.
give us just a second.
This is the charge, yeah. Here's the educational specs.
I think we're short one. Pretty sure.
Have it already. Is this the, where it's David title?
You have that?
I got that from Paul earlier, so.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, actually, there's plenty of those. There was just one of these documents missing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Can you give us just a second to read the charge very
Most
quickly?
certainly.
We just got it. Thank you.
That was me.
Okay. Everyone have an opportunity to at least look at the charge
Yeah.
at this point? All right. Please introduce yourselves, Mr. Quinn.
Sure. I'm Tom Quinn. I'm the chair of the Riverfield School Renovation Project.
Okay.
I'm Christine Messina, the vice chair of the Riverfield Building Committee.
Well, thank you for your service on the building committee and all the hard work behind you and ahead of you. So,
We've gotten a glimpse of it.
yeah, please proceed.
So what we're looking for really is the initial seed money of $250,000, which is consistent with Stratfield School, consistent of Fairfield Woods, all the past projects of $250,000. And it relates primarily to some architectural fees, infrastructure surveys, obviously the hazardous material surveys, destructive testing, which for those that don't know what that means, I had to look it up when I first started, was endurance testing, okay? The site and geotechnical surveys, all the types of surveys that you need before you can even start thinking about building anything. And the 250,000 is pretty consistent to what they spent in the neighborhood of 216 to 255,000. Any residual will be rolled over against the total bond or returned to the town.
Okay. Any questions from board members? Mr. Bellitto?
Thank you, and good evening. Thanks for your service. In the committee charge, looking at the second paragraph, fifth line down, says, "The RBC shall retain a construction manager to facilitate and accomplish necessary renovations." Am I to assume that that is the same as an owner's representative, or do you mean something different by that?
And there's going to be a construction manager, but also an owner's rep.
Oh, you're going to have both.
We'll have both. What they learned from Stratfield School, where they didn't have the owner's rep, okay, unless you have somebody on the committee that's dedicated to really looking at everything, it's virtually impossible to do it right.
I agree. I agree.
Okay? And so we would, yeah, we really want to make sure that this is done the cleanest, most efficient way possible, and still coming out with a quality product.
Right. No, that's excellent news. I'm happy to hear that. One question, though, is where in the funding request, which line item is the cost of the owner's rep?
This is only to put the seed money.
Okay.
We're not to the point of construction management or the owner's rep. That
At
will
what
come-
point do we anticipate they'll be online?
When we get all the architects' drawings, preliminary drawings, and, which is June 19th. And then we'll be looking at also the estimates for construction rep
Okay.
and owner's rep.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, other questions? Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question on the architect. Where are you, if anywhere as of now, on choosing or about to choose or put items out to bid for the architect?
At our last meeting on May 29th, we shortlisted out of the 13 applicants 4 architectural firms. We used the state-provided matrix. It's a very stringent system for how you choose for town projects, architects and other licensed professionals. And out of the 14, it was narrowed down to Antonazzi Associates, Kenneth Barnson, Fletcher Thompson, and Newman Architects. And on June 19th, they'll all make their presentations to the building committee.
Okay. So if I could just ask, with the owner's rep and the architect, because in past projects, and I want to talk about one briefly in a couple of minutes, they wield a lot of control over these projects, right?
Yes.
So who manages the architect? In other words, who keeps the architect in line with the scope of what we're trying to accomplish?
The owner's rep. The owner's rep is the direct link to the building committee and to the town of Fairfield, and they should always have our best interests as a town as their number one priority.
Because the owner's rep is getting paid by the town.
Correct.
And directly reports to the committee. So ultimately, it's our responsibility.
Okay. Because I'll tell you why I bring it up, not to go down memory lane, but if the board remembers, we had a presentation just within the past month or so, maybe 2 months, from Hoffman Architects in regards to the Fairfield Ward roof project. And they stood in front of the board, Hoffman did, with the member of Town Facilities Commission, and asked for an $11 million bond for a 257,000 square foot roof. So we went through hours of questioning the backup. And in the end, the architect insisted that $11 million was the right number. Now, since then, it's gone out for bid. And I don't know, Paul, can you tell me? I mean, I looked up on the website on what the bids came in at.
About
I
half.
just want to be clear. Right.
Prior to any, obviously, construction hasn't started and won't start for another 3 or 4 weeks. But the bid was awarded $6.4 million, roughly. To Silktown Roofing.
All right, so I noticed a couple of things. First of all, I noticed there was only 2 bidders, and I don't know why, and I know you don't know why, but that's, I don't know, I know that if I was a roofing contractor and there was $11 million out there, I would have driven 1,000 miles, right, to bid on this project. So I'm not quite sure why there's only two bidders. But what I really don't understand is how the architect was so far off on the estimate, and why the insistence on the $11 million. And I know, I'm just saying it for the record, it's a question that I think, that really I think the architect should answer to, somebody. But the question I have now is, the bond's out there for $11 million. What happens to the rest of the money at this point? I mean, is it out there for them for use for this project, or is it not? Now that the bid is done, and we know what it's going to cost, we're talking $4 million at this point.
Yeah, I think, and we'd follow, first off, that, as you're aware, is going to transpire over the next 3.5 years, essentially. That was the intent on that project. We will not bond anywhere near that amount. I think the other good news on that, through the efforts of Senator McKinney, Representative Fawcett, Kupchak, and Long, we were able to obtain state funding, which at the time was not anticipated when we bonded it. And so there's, our bonding efforts, or what we will eventually bond on that, is probably more in the $5.5 million category. At some point, this body and the RTM and the Board of Selectmen may want to reduce that, reduce that bond resolution. We're certainly not going to bond any. The intent was to bond roughly half of that project, or half of our anticipated costs in the coming bond sale, which is scheduled for next month. And we're in the process of finalizing that list right now. But I assure you, and I think the First Selectman can assure you, we're not going to bond that money. I think, if I had to guess, I think we're probably looking at something in the $5.5 million category that we'll be bonding. We still have to keep in mind that the appropriation has to be for the gross amount, gross of the state aid that we'll be receiving. But I don't anticipate at this time, I don't want to be locked into a number right now, but in the upcoming bond sale, that we would probably bond in the $2.5 to $3 million range.
All right. But I bring it up because as you present the numbers, obviously we're going to look for accuracy, okay? It's something in line with what's really going to be taking place. And it just caused a lot of confusion that night. It caused 2 hours of a discussion that really didn't have to take place. And because now we weren't going to hold up the project, that's why we voted for it. All right, we wanted to move the project along. Just a question on the owner's rep. Like, where is this a individual? Is it a company? Where does the owner's rep come from?
It's a company. It's the job, like any other job, will be put out to bid through the purchasing department, and we'd have applicants. The number of applicants depends on the market. I honestly don't know where. I assume that contractors look at various town websites when they're looking for work. I mean, like you, in this market, I would think we'd have more bidders as opposed to less. Everybody's out there looking for jobs. Public projects are great paying gigs that every contractor wants a piece of.
Right.
Yeah, normally it is a company. It is not personal contractor or anything.
Okay. Just last question. I just want to ask about references. With the architect, with the owner's rep, as part of the bidding process, references, if we've used them before I take it we're only going to use people that have done a good job for us in the past, but other than that, we check references and...
Yes, the purchasing department will be supplying references on the short list of architects prior to our June 19th meeting, so that we can review them and ask questions of the architects at the meeting.
Make sure everyone's financially stable, so
That is
2
correct.
years, if something
And
goes
also
wrong.
whether or not they've had issues, whether it's here or someplace else.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure, go to Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I'm going to be back on the owner's rep here, too. I'm very happy to hear you're going to do this. But just walk me through the process. You're going to, by June 19th, you're going to have all the architect's bids, but you will not have an owner's rep yet.
No.
Right. So the process and the scenario that Mr. Brown was laying out seems to me you'd want that owner's rep. That seems to me like you want that to be your first
So
right?
so we understand what we get June 19th. We're not getting a laid-down, detailed schematic of what's going to happen.
Okay.
What we're really getting is, of these 4 architectural firms, which ones do we feel comfortable with that look like they know what they're doing, what we're looking for? Okay? That's really what we're getting.
It's basically a sales pitch.
Yeah, and,
Okay.
and we're also bound by state law to nominate, to get to these 4, we have to do a matrix. That's mandated by state law. It's all mathematical. And it's, again, in the short list, again, it will be mathematical, okay, on this matrix. So, I mean, everything will be above board, but it's certainly, there is no need at that point for an owner's rep. We will be putting out bids and RFPs for an owner's rep contingent upon selecting an architect.
So that's the process. Select the architect, then the owner's rep,
And
and
then
then
the-
he kind of takes over.
And the construction manager,
Okay. And my last question is on the ed spec here. Interior building environment, it says separate independent commissioning of mechanical engineering plumbing systems to include airflow balancing, blah, blah, blah.
yep.
Is hired directly by the building committee, not the construction manager or design team. So doesn't that, in all intents and purposes, take the owner rep out of that decision
Well,
process as well?
not the owner's rep per se, okay? When we write the RFP for the owner's rep,
Right.
we can put that in there.
Okay, so you're not
What he's-
prohibited by what this is. This isn't limiting you in any
No,
way.
that's
right?
not going to limit us in the owner's rep. But that does say who we're hiring for what job,
Got it. Okay, great, thank you.
okay?
Any other questions? Mr. Kiley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your hard work on this project. The owner's rep concept is a good one, and I just want to make sure that I can follow the questions and the points and understand it. So if I'm redundant, please excuse me. The role of the owner's rep is to basically ride herd on the project on behalf of the building committee and the town,
Correct.
right? Okay. And that's all good news. He works for us, he or she works for us. We pay them, they represent us, they protect our interests. That's the way that works. Did I hear that owner's rep would not be hired before we hire or engage the architect?
When we choose an architect, it is primarily on the tentative plans that they give us, okay? Has nothing to do with the actual digging in the ground.
Yes,
Or,
just to answer your question.
or hiring a construction.
Okay, I mean, having not done this before, I guess my question would be, does it make sense to have that guy or that firm hired to be part of the architectural choosing process, or does that not add any value?
I'm not sure it adds any value. I don't know to say equivocally that it doesn't add value.
Okay,
But in the past precedents that I've seen, it hasn't been done that way.
okay. Would the owner's rep be engaged before the final plans were presented for funding in conjunction with the project coming before town bodies?
I would certainly hope so.
Because I think that's back to one of Mr. Brown's points, that last time around, and we've had mixed results over the years with estimates and architectural estimates, and you've got construction here, you've got architects here, and they don't always agree, right? And that's fine and that's understandable, but it seems that the earlier they were in that process, possibly the more accurate the architectural estimates could be. And that's been a concern of our board for a while, that sometimes the numbers are larger than they end up being, and sometimes they can't be substantiated on a detailed basis. And we end up looking at a number which is obviously plenty, like 11 was plenty to cover the 5, but it seemed excessive. And in hindsight now, it obviously was. So that's got nothing to do with this project, but the process kind of leaves us wondering, is there a better way to move the pieces around the chessboard so that we know what we're doing, how much it's going to cost within reason, so that there aren't any surprises in the end?
It sounds from what all of you are saying that our goal should be to get the owner's rep involved as early as possible. As soon as we select this architect on the 19th, on the 20th, we should be getting the owner's rep in line. So that'll be the goal.
Well, I'm trying to understand. I'm not trying to manage your
No,
committee.
listen, you have more experience listening to people like me come before you than I do, so in learning from the experiences you've all had on prior projects, if that's what's going to make it easier, and that's what you guys are telling us, that's absolutely what we should do.
That doesn't preclude that there be missed estimates, so you all understand.
Right, right.
Because an owner's rep can only
Right.
perceive what he sees on paper until
Right.
they get into the project,
Good.
okay? But the purpose of the owner's rep is to represent us. And the sooner they get involved in the project, the better off we'll all be, okay?
Right.
I don't think it's a panacea, okay?
Right,
Certainly,
right.
I've spent most of my life in the private sector, and I've built something like 10 plants,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And believe me, there are estimates and there are estimates.
Right, I know.
And, you know, however, 50% misses or 100% misses, depending how you calculate it, okay, is rare.
It's memorable.
Yes, it is.
Right, it is. And I want to thank you for walking us through this, and thank you for going through the detailed explanation and for going down this route, so thanks.
No problem.
Can I go? Yeah. Then I'll go back to Mr. Bellitto. I don't know who in the room might know this, but when you're picking the architect, I definitely think our past experience as a town with that architect has to come into play. With that in mind, are any of the 4 or 5 architects that you're speaking of, are they currently doing work for us?
Currently, no.
Okay, so none of them are on any of
They
the
have
existing
done one,
products.
did Newman, I believe, did
Newman
the
did the
Fairfield Library.
Townsend
Library.
Hawley
Okay.
did some projects back in the early part of the last decade at what was then Fairfield High
Who
School.
just did Fairfield Woods and who did
And
Sherman?
that was Tai Cheng or somebody.
Yeah, and who did,
Sorry about that, I don't know the name.
no, I just totally missed that.
Tai Suk, I don't know.
And who did Sherman? Do we know?
Yes, I do, but I can't remember it. But yeah, that's it.
Miles did Sherman.
The,
Burr was banned.
That's why I want to remember that.
Well,
the,
they won't allow him to put in a bid.
well, a couple things. I think, first of all, I think you're going into it, based on what I can understand and hear you speaking, with the right attitude and the right design for your committee, so that's great. And it gives it a better chance of success. And I think it's going to be very important that you do look at some of the other building committees and their successes and their challenges, and learn from those, particularly in the area of saving money. And we have had some instances where there doesn't appear to have been great communication within the various constituencies doing the work, that has caused some cost issues. I don't want to steal anybody's thunder. The Board of Selectmen is about to get a report tomorrow on the Sherman School, and I happened to be able to go on a tour with a few other officials last week of Sherman, and I saw some items there that were quite interesting to me, that were not part of the original design. The one that stands to mind is within the administrative area, there was a so-called cloud ceiling, which was an architecturally cool thing, but quite frankly, I don't think it was the best use of funds. And to be honest, I think there's some disagreement, if I hear correctly, over whether that's what the building committee wanted versus what the architect put into the design and then what was built. Saw one instance where there was a skylight, where there was some issue with the ceiling around the skylight that hadn't been in the design plans. There was one that I haven't gotten to the bottom of yet, but I want to pay particular attention to, and this board should be mindful of, was the fact that there was a conference room built with a screen, an automatic screen that's supposed to descend, much like one of those, but it's by a switch, and it's supposed to descend. And I was told the reason that screen was put in on an automatic basis was because then it's not technology, it's part of the building, to get away from smart boards. So, things like that, we need to be mindful of as we build these buildings. And I think Sherman's going to look great. I'm very happy we did the school. I know we've got another project for Sherman down the road because the ventilation in some of the major areas of that building are really difficult. We wrestled with, the town administration wrestled with, the whole concept of the building being in the floodplain, so the whole, how much we could spend on that building and getting the bang for the buck. And I just think we need to be mindful of that, particularly in a building. We've spent a lot of time in Riverfield through the years at various meetings and town events, and the building needs your work desperately.
Oh, very much so.
It's a very beat-up building, and some areas of it are, in my opinion, are very bad. And I just want to make sure that in the grand totality of what you're going to spend here, when it comes back, that it's spent as wisely as possible, and that it's not spent on, cool architectural, hip new things, cloud ceiling, stuff like that. But it's spent on the things that are going to add to the educational value for the kids.
I can assure you that our intent is not to spend on cool architectural things.
I'm just not very cool.
I'm not a cool person, okay? I'm a pretty hard-nosed, practical person. If they're going to be cool things, it's for the education of our kids. It sure as hell isn't going to be for a cloud ceiling. But the charge that we got, so you understand how we view this, is how to, I remember that comment too, to minimize the ongoing cost of maintenance and operation of the building and the improvements. Number two is to incorporate appropriate green initiatives and capabilities within the design and operation. And thirdly, how to incorporate time-tested options, design features, and construction techniques. So we're really looking to do things that work, that have potential to lower our maintenance cost, and that are green. And there's levels of green that you can achieve. And as long as we don't get carried away with trying to be, the environmental gurus, rather than building a school that has green, tendencies.
Question, Mr. Hiller, on the item before us, and then I do want to go to Mr. Bellitto. The only question I have is the 250. There was some, I just want to confirm, for other projects of this like, what has been the amount that has been appropriated, and what in general has been spent? Because I'm not interested in over-appropriating at this point in time.
Essentially, 250 was appropriated on both Stratfield and Fairfield Woods. Those funds, and as Mr. Quinn stated earlier, whatever is left in that rolls into the other projects. So
How much were left in the other two projects?
Paul, if I may,
Go ahead,
the last,
Tom. Thank you.
the numbers that I got from the office were Stratfield Building Committee had committed $231,579 as of 7 April, okay, against that 250. And Stratfield, I don't have a date on
No,
this.
that was Fairfield Woods.
I mean, yeah, Stratfield. Yeah, the next one, Fairfield Woods, and I don't have a date on it, was 245, 350, 160.
So you're in the ballpark of
So
this.
it's, see what I've got.
Okay. And lastly, again, my comments on, earlier on Sherman, it's way premature in that, I know there's going to be reports on it. I just know when I went on that tour, what I saw, and the pains that we went through to get that school done well for the kids, not for architectural awards or whatever. That's my opinion. I'm going to go to Mr. Bellitto. Thank you.
First of all, with Sherman, I'm speechless and furious, and I guess my invite to the tour got lost in the mail because I didn't know about it, but be that as it may. I'm hoping...
Let me be clear,
Yeah.
it wasn't a formal tour. It
Right.
was basically a heard some things, got in touch with Mrs. Iacona, and we just went to the school and asked if we could walk around. So it wasn't anything formal.
Okay, fair enough. I'm hoping that with this committee, we can kind of have a template for the way it's supposed to be done. And I'm very glad that Mr. Quinn is working on this. I've known Mr. Quinn since I was a little kid, and I can attest to his no-nonsense manner and devotion to this town. So I'm glad that from this point forward, maybe we can start getting this right. With that in mind, and with the idea that hopefully this can be kind of an example and a template for future building committees, I just wanted to ask if we can amend or add to the committee charge to specifically mention the owner's representative in that sentence that I had alluded to earlier, just so that if we're going to use this as a template going forward, it's very clear that that's part of the process.
I think what you have in front of you, I appreciate your comments, but what you have in front of you is a funding request. The committee charge was adopted by the Board of Selectmen, was sent to the, and also at a point in time when the committee was formed, approved by the Board of Selectmen and subsequently approved by the RTM. I think with the funding request, I think Mr. Quinn and Ms. Messina have clearly heard your comments tonight in this regard. But I think to amend the committee charge at this point,
It's out of our area.
is, we're trying to stay in line with the state regulations on this. And Mr. Morabito may comment on it, or the first selectman, I think, has a comment
Please.
too.
Borrow a mic here. I think that, first off, I believe the charge is a function of what the Board of Selectmen approves and sets that. And we try to add a few more phrases in this and guidelines than has been in typical building committee charges.
For good reason.
In terms of
Sure.
using time-tested techniques, in terms of following appropriate green standards, in terms of looking at for maintenance costs so we don't run into things like the siding at Ludlow Middle School, the boiler at Dwight, some of the other issues we run into over time. If you do look at the charge, it does reference the report that was done on building committees that I believe Mr. Flynn sat on. And that's specific, one of the guidelines in there is to use an owner's rep.
Good, okay, so there was a specific reference
They're
then.
referencing it through that.
Okay.
There's an org chart, some other things that were included in that. So we're trying to go back to use appropriate guidelines. Again, the other thing we did with the Riverfield Committee that hasn't been done before is we held an orientation. We brought Twig Holland in from purchasing, brought Caitlin Bossy in from finance. We brought Eileen Kennelly in to talk about FOI and Robert's rules, to make sure that they knew what resources were available. We had Mr. Morabito come and talk about what happened on the Board of Ed side. So we basically tried to educate the committee as to how things work, what resources they had, and help them know that they're not alone in going through this. So we're trying to change the way we do it, set that template up just as you were advising.
I appreciate that, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that that was memorialized, and from what you told me, it is, so that's fine. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Brown?
Quick question here. Are you working right now within a budget? Has anyone said?
No, we don't have a budget. No.
Okay. Well, you know, there is a number.
I don't have a number. You asked the question, I don't have a number.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Tetra, please.
For the Riverfield project, at this point, they can't spend anything because nothing's been appropriated.
No, but what I'm saying,
What's before you is the first.
I understand. But there is, the Board of Ed has a facilities plan, and at one point, Riverfield had a number. This is what we think it's going to be. And the number was at one point $9 million.
$9 million, yes.
Right. Okay, so has that been discussed, or has that been added upon, or
No.
anything?
Nothing. No.
It's 11 now.
Again, this committee doesn't have a number. We're not biased in any way at all. We have the specs in front of us. We have architects coming in. They're going to give us, the financials at that evening, what they estimate it's going to cost. We're going to have an owner's rep look at it. So, and then we'll be glad to share that with you.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Leclerc, please.
Okay, my question is, are you, like, within the Board of Ed specs, are you required to meet all of these things, or are you still, like, reviewing those things and trying to determine what the school needs and if it covers everything, and, or if there's something in here that you don't want at the school?
Our goal is to meet 100% of the ed spec.
Okay.
And if anything pops up, then go back to the Board of Ed and review the ed specs.
Okay. Because my concern is, I spent 9 years as a parent at Riverfield, and it's a great school, but it's also very tired and worn, and it's lacking a lot of the special spaces that other schools have. And so I don't want to sacrifice to add capacity to something that we may need for enrollment, but we may not. Like right now, you don't actually need some of that extra room. And Riverfield it's very locked in, and there's a lot of traffic issues and safety issues that you have to consider when you're doing this renovation. And so I want to make sure that everything is being considered, and maybe even like a traffic study on how your traffic flow will be.
Yep, the traffic study is contained within the ed spec.
Okay.
And there is a great deal of time being spent on the special needs for the kids in the school.
Okay, that's good to hear. My son did speech behind a curtain. And
Yes, that curtain's still there. They do physical therapy behind that as well.
He won't be there.
No.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any other questions, comments from board members? One item. From my own perspective, the Board of Education spends a lot of time on that capital and that facilities plan. So they came up with a number, Mr. Carey reminds us that the number was $11 million for that plan, because they have number of buildings to take care of and projects that they need to take on. So I don't know what the feedback loop is between the building committee and the Board of Education if your number comes in out of whack at the start. But I think there needs to be a meeting of the minds at some point. If you come in at a much higher number than that 11 million, as to what the Board of Ed is willing to go without or to prioritize in order to fund the project. Because at the end of the day, there's a pot of money there to do Riverfield and other projects. And if this comes in significantly higher than 11, and that's the Board of Ed's priority, one of the questions I'm going to ask is, what's not getting done? If, in fact, that ever reaches us, because it might not reach us, because it might not go past the Board of Selectmen. So I think, that number was put out there by the Board of Education, as were the ed specifications put out there by the Board of Education. If those two don't jive, I think that's a discussion that should take place before it comes before us.
Oh, absolutely.
As to what's not going to work.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's always happened in the past. Which
It
is
will happen.
Yeah.
It has to happen, because there's got to be a series of trade-offs, if indeed the dollars come in over any biased number or prescribed number.
Right. So because they have an entire plan that they spent a ton of time on for what they want to do with their buildings. And I think we need to respect that and respect the other buildings as well.
Yeah, and the other side of the coin is, we need to make sure, no matter what their plan is, that we deliver a product
Yep,
that we were commissioned to do for the kids,
yep,
okay?
yep. Any other questions, comments from board members, anyone? Do we have any comments from the public? I know there's a couple of members of the Board of Education here. Hello.
Good evening. Pamela Iacono, Chairman of the Fairfield Board of Education. I just want to thank you for your consideration this evening and ask you to approve this funding request. As you know, this is our top priority for buildings right now, and we do want to see it go through. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have one more comment, if I might.
Sure, Mr. Quinn, please.
The members of the PTA from Riverfield had a meeting tonight, so they couldn't be here. But I wanted to convey that if you needed them here, they'd be here in droves.
I'm sure they would.
Okay?
Thank you. All right. Seeing none, I'm going to move the item before us, okay? Okay, so the item now before us is to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution requested by the Riverfield School Building Committee. Resolved that the bond appropriation entitled Resolution Appropriating $250,000 for costs associated with the improvement and renovation of Riverfield Elementary School and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation consisting of 3 pages, be and hereby is approved. We were provided with the 3-page bond resolution. Okay. No comments on that? Questions, concerns? Okay. All in favor of this item? Opposed? Abstentions?
Thank you all.
The
I
item
appreciate
passes.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck with your ongoing
Yeah,
project.
we'll be back.
Yeah. I was afraid you were going to say that. All right, let's take about a 5-minute recess, and we'll come back and go through the other items on the agenda real quick.
Mr. Audience.
Jeez, yeah. Roger.
All right, we've got 2 more items of note tonight on the agenda. Hopefully, they'll go quickly.
Is item 2, and what's the second one?
There's 2. There's the Budget Subcommittee, and then Mr. DeWitt was just going to talk to us about what he's been doing with the Private Agency Subcommittee. And I wouldn't say, I don't believe certainly number 6 in this line item, to hear a report and update from the Budget Subcommittee of the Board of Finance. That's correct. Number 7, to hear a report and update from the Private Agency Subcommittee of the Board of Finance. I don't believe that's a subcommittee of the Board of Finance, actually. That's a broader committee that I think was put together
You're
with
correct on that.
Selectman's
There's
office.
other members on it, too. I apologize.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that we were all clear on that, so I'm glad, that's fine. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bellitto for a brief discussion on what's going on with the Budget Subcommittee. You recall, we always try to do a post-mortem, what was good, what was bad, and what we can do better, and here we go.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to thank my colleagues, Mr. Stone and Mr. DeWitt, for meeting on short notice and plowing through this. As always, their input is invaluable, and I particularly want to thank Mr. DeWitt, who got the minutes done and got me the information to fill this sheet this morning, so thank you very much for that. Basically, we kind of break it down into what was good, what was bad, and what we recommend for future actions. What was good, first of all, we're starting to do this report on a regular basis. We're trying to get it done at the June meeting. Reason being is that it's far enough away from the budget process that we've all calmed down, but also that it's close enough so that it's kind of fresh in our minds and we can make whatever recommendations we make if the board decides to go forward with them, we have adequate time to implement them for the next budget cycle. What was good this year was that the budget presentations were more concise and complete. And I thank Mr. Tetro and all the department heads for that. Was notably shorter and more to the point. We got our electronic materials beforehand, and the PDFs were available on the town website. Again, it's that whole idea of trying to get the information to us faster so that we can consider it. Schedule breaks and time cap for meetings. Again, you know, when you're at 11:30 at night and you're going through something new, it's impossible to, you know, maintain the level of concentration you need to give things a fair hearing. So I think that we certainly did a good job with, you know, keeping fresh and getting through the meetings in a timely manner. Leadership, certainly Mr. Flynn deserves a lot of credit in terms of being able to handle the number of presenters and speakers and public comment that we had. It's not easy to, you know, commandeer this rodeo, and Mr. Flynn, as always, does an excellent job. The level of discussion. This board, I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of the fact that we're always respectful of one another, respectful of those who speak before us, and that even when we disagree, we do so respectfully. And I think that's a real hallmark of our board, and I think that the public recognizes that. And also the Fair TV recording of the meetings. I was just telling Jerry in the hall that it's amazing to me how many people actually watch these meetings. I guess that's a statement about how bad television is right now, but it certainly is encouraging that people are getting more engaged in the process and are better informed as citizens. Now, number two, what was bad? RTM attendance. Now, I say that with a proviso. It is improving. Certainly, we saw more people here this year than we had in past years, but obviously, given what was going on in the last couple weeks, few weeks, there's certainly a disconnect that exists between what our board does and what goes on subsequently. So I'm hoping that more RTM members will take advantage of Fair TV and watch the meetings on TV so that because they're last in the process, you know, it would be beneficial for RTM members to kind of get a sense of where the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance are going. Not so much to, you know, make their decisions, but at least to have a flavor of what's going on. So that's something that certainly always could need to use improvement. The non-recurring capital discussions are still impeding the budget process. Obviously, this year we were successful in moving it to the beginning of the budget process, trying to keep it outside and apart from, which I think is a good thing, and I'll get to a recommendation on that later. But it still seems like we're kind of digesting an awful lot of information in a very short amount of time, so it's something to consider for the future. Still no good not-for-profit approval format, and that's something that Mr. DeWitt and his subcommittee will be working on in the future. Last-minute updates not disclosed in time. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, on the approval process,
Yes.
what you mean by that is, and I'm asking, is how they get on and how they get off the
Exactly.
list. It's not the budget approval, it's how they get
Exactly.
on and how they get off the list.
Exactly.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So last-minute updates not disclosed in time to be included in the final budget vote. We got a couple of Sunday surprises this year, which we certainly understand that information's always changing and things, by their very nature, get through last minute. But a couple of things that we heard were really not cool. So we're hoping that that will change in the future and that any information that is out there, particularly with respect to lawsuits, found surpluses, will be disclosed to us so that we can actually consider it in our vote. So future actions, recommendations. Close on the charity approval process, how you get on and off, and Mr. DeWitt will be speaking to that later. List assumptions of the contingency fund. Obviously, with that being such a big issue this year, we thought it appropriate that without getting into specifics on the dollar amounts, talk about what exactly are the assumptions for what the money is put in there for. Obviously, this year, union contracts made up a big part of that, but you know, snow plowing is a part of it. But just to get a sense of what general topics make up the contingency fund so that for future budget seasons we remember, oh yeah, that's why we put that in there. Recommendations for the real mill rate calculation sheet. The sheet that we have at the last meeting, and we always ask, well, what does this mean for the average taxpayer? What if your house is assessed at, say, $500, $750? What's the difference between this year's tax bill and last year's tax bill? I think having that information just as a matter of course on that sheet would be important. Maybe what we could do is put the median home assessment and then do just general benchmarks like 300, 500, 700, and 1 million, just to give people a sense of, you know, what's happening with their tax bill. And also that those benchmarks can be provided, proposed benchmarks can be provided as part of the data supplied to the RTM so that they're aware of, you know, what the impact of what our decision is on the average person's tax bill in town. The Saturday budget meeting, the open forum, we're making a recommendation that it should be canceled. The reason why we did it in the first place was as an accommodation to those citizens who couldn't make our evening meetings. And obviously, the attendance the last couple of years has been, well, it's been abysmal. And now with Fair TV being available, frankly, the reason for that meeting in the first place has kind of gone away. If you have a television with cable, you have a computer, you have access to our meetings. So the accessibility is not really an issue anymore. And frankly, if more people showed up, I'd probably be inclined to say, you know what, let's keep doing it, it's worth it. But we have 5 people there this year, and I just don't think it's worth continuing with that kind of attendance and the fact that our meetings are available to anyone who chooses to view them. A discussion point, we don't have a formal recommendation to make, but a discussion point is, should the non-recurring capital be completely removed from the budget process, meaning voting on it in October after the long-term capital planning event in the fall with the first selectman? The reason we might want to consider is that, A, it will kind of give us a break during the budget season, and it will also give department heads the ability to understand what their capital items have been approved, and if something gets shot down, they have time to consider it for their operating budget. I thought particularly with the Board of Ed, there was that $250,000 student information system, where it could have gone either way. It could have been something that was put in the operating, which of course it was, or it could have been a non-recurring capital item. If it comes before us at a separate time and we shoot it down, well, then maybe they could say, you know what, this is really important to us, we're going to put it in our operating budget. So just something for discussion. We don't have a formal recommendation to make on that. And then finally, the electronic delivery policy. It's still a work in progress, and obviously one of the things that I found personally is that I don't have a password for Wi-Fi access here, so I actually can't access the documents on my Kindle. And I know that certain members have talked about the fact that, you know, we got to print the stuff out at home. It's difficult. You know, I work and trying to find some place to print it. So what we're thinking about doing is tweaking that to maybe allow for regular hard copy delivery if a board member particularly requests it, and finding out a way to tap into the Wi-Fi here so that we can actually access the documents on our devices and laptops. So that's basically the report. So at this time, I'll be happy to you know, open it up for discussion, questions, and what do you think?
Anyone have anything?
Just one comment
Yeah, Mr. Brown.
on number 3E, on the capital improvement projects we're talking about there, right? Or non-recurring.
Right.
It's something that the subcommittee that was formed by this board and working with the first selectman, well, with a couple members of the RTM and the Board of Ed, is looking at. And we
Terrific.
do have a meeting sometime in June, I believe it's June 14th or around that date, and this will most likely be on the agenda.
Good. That's good to know. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brown. Mr. Hiller?
One comment, and this is more on schedule.
Sure.
And who gets scheduled on. As you may recall, the last full regular open session had human resources, the pension fund, OPEB, medical insurance, all that stuff, which are, as First Selectman has called some of
Weighty items.
the
Yes.
major drivers. And it was at the very end. These items literally permeate every aspect of the budget. And I think if we could move that discussion up front. Sometimes, you know, one of the issues, of course, is the medical insurance issue has been a moving target.
Right.
Yeah, one of the reasons we moved it back, Paul, was to have better available information.
Yeah.
Because we were finding that we were getting repeated turns of the information through the budget process when it was part of the earlier sessions.
That's true, and I think the
Yeah.
other thing also that really pushed all those things towards the end this past year was we knew that we were doing the experience study with the pension fund, which
Right.
impacted the pension contribution, it impacted the OPEB. So we had to wait for the pension board to act, and then to get some recalculations from the actuary and move that, so that threw it all there. But we were really kind of overloaded with some very big items.
I
on
agree.
that last night.
But, yeah,
And,
might I ask your subcommittee, maybe one of the things they can take up sooner rather than later while
Sure.
it's fresh in their minds, is what each night should look like, without
Right.
specific dates next to them, but what departments we should, because we tend to do that in January, right, December, January.
And that's too late.
It's
Right.
9 months removed from what we went through.
Right.
So for the same reason you're saying put this on the agenda now in June, I think Mr. Hiller scheduling out the nights, not the dates,
Right.
but the actual topics for discussion and organizing them now,
Sure.
what's fresher in our mind makes more sense.
I think that makes perfect sense. One thing I will point out, though, is that the original calendar that we had talked about did have some of those items in the beginning, And in an effort to accommodate the non-recurring capital discussion and also the first selectman's budget presentation, we had to move some things around, and it just kind of ended up on that night. So there was the intent originally to not have all the heavy items on the last night of deliberations. But certainly, we can put together a prototype calendar without dates, but with the topics to be covered based on our experience and what we know it takes a long time and what doesn't. And I'll work with Mr. Hiller and with the subcommittee on that, absolutely.
Yeah. Mrs. Leclerc?
Oh, I was wondering, would it be possible the night we have the presentations for pension and actuary and things, to schedule a joint meeting with all the boards, the Board of Selectmen and RTM and us, and that way everyone hears the same reports and is on the same page?
I think we could do that. The only thing I would say is, why just those items? Just because of the fact that they're so weighty and we need an expert to come by?
Right, the experts are there. And
I mean, having all three boards in one room, I guess logistically, I don't know if we can even do that, but it's certainly worth considering. I mean, I see what your point is.
Yeah, they're
Any
always
other
welcome.
thoughts about that?
Well, they're always welcome to come.
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, they're always welcome to come. You might not want all the members of the RTM, but you might want representatives of
Committees,
the
yeah.
RTM committee
Right.
heads, somebody that, yeah. I'm sorry, Mr. DeWitt, please.
Yeah, one of the things we were kicking around the other day in our meeting was, after this year's process, I called up Jeff Steele and I said, hey, who's in charge of the budget subcommittee of the RTM? And he informed me there was none, which I was really surprised to hear. So, might be worth consideration, you know, just, of course, we can't dictate what the RTM does, but that they create a kind of a budget subcommittee, and maybe that four person committee can do just what Mary said, be here for the big meaty topics and take that back firsthand.
Thank you,
So,
Chris.
something to consider.
Yeah, I'll speak to the RTM, I'll speak to leadership about that. Anybody else? Mr. Brockville?
Thanks. I just want to, I think I spoke about this once before, but I sort of want to.
You might want to get the mic.
I'm terribly sorry. I think I've spoken about this at a previous meeting with Mr. Bellitto on the electronic delivery policy.
Yes.
I would urge you, or us, you know, I've been hearing literally for as long as I've been out of college and working about the paperless office.
Yeah.
Which is probably the most overpromised revolution in the history of promises, and it just hasn't happened.
Right.
And I'm sure that sometime in the near future, there'll be a better delivery system. I assume maybe within the next 5-10 years, Paul will literally walk around, rather than handing out all these stacks of papers, will literally hand out a Android or an iPad or something with everything loaded onto it, and they'll probably cost $40 by then. But we're not there yet, and I don't. Even if the PDFs came and I knew how to do it, I don't think I could sit here with a Kindle or a tablet and flip through the pages the way I'm able to quickly flip through these, make notes by hand and so
Sure.
forth. In fact, I know I couldn't.
Right.
So I think that for the time being, and since somebody has to print them up anyway, it's not like we're saving paper or anything if we do it versus the town. I think for the time being, at least for me, it's important still to have the the papers. I know somebody has to do it, unfortunately, and drop the yellow envelopes in my mailbox, but at this point, I don't think
We're not there yet.
I just don't think we're there yet. I really don't.
That's a fair point, and I think it goes to the purpose of it. One of what the purposes of which is to try to, you know, be more economical and get paperless. But I think one of the other things that certainly we were thinking of was the fact that by doing it through email, it gives you more time to review, because if Paul is at his office and he has the information there, rather than having to print it all out, stuff it in envelopes, drive to all of our houses and deliver it, that's like a day's worth of work. By delivering it electronically, at least we have the chance at home to review it initially, you know, in our, you know, multiple amounts of spare time. But, you know, I agree that when you're here, having the actual hard copy is helpful, and it is tough to get away from. So, you know, maybe having the electronic delivery continue, but with the hard copy to follow, might be the way to go, so that at least we get it earlier.
Yeah, let me just interrupt. I agree with you 100%. I didn't mean to imply that we shouldn't do the
Understood.
I mean, I
Yep.
like that as well, and sometimes you print it up and take a peek at it on your computer, but it just doesn't replace at this point having that stack in
Right.
front of you. And I think especially annotating is the key. There really is no modern way to write what Mr. Flynn has shown me, the handwritten
Chicken
notes.
scratch.
There's just no way to do it on a tablet that I know of, at least.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, I want to commend the committee. Thank you for getting together in very short notice on that. It's a very important function. I actually think it's one of the most beneficial things we do is go back and look at it each year, how we can do things a little bit better. We've got some follow-up items there. Let's work on those if we could.
Sure.
Mr. Brown, please let us know how your committee comes out on that, because I do think that'll help inform and dictate what our budget subcommittee thinks on the timing and scheduling
No
of
problem.
some things.
We'll meet before our next meeting. our
Great.
next Board of Finance
Mr. Hiller,
meeting,
can you
not
put on our next agenda then, that we're going to hear from that, the committee?
That will be the quarter review meeting scheduled for July 24th.
That'd be perfect. Perfect timing for that. Yeah, we do not have a July meeting, is that correct?
It's not on the calendar, no.
Okay.
It would be July 3rd, and people may be otherwise involved. That-
Right, right.
There's no pending appropriations that need
Just a
action.
quarter. Yeah, there's no regular July meeting. It would have fallen on July 3rd. We had discussed that with the administration at the time. Certainly, if things change, I will let you know. I've been trying to be quiet and leave you guys alone, but I'm sure that'll change sometime soon. Right, exactly. You've all missed me, I understand. We're lonely. All right. And number 7, to hear a report and update from the private agency subcommittee. So we're going to go to Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to report that the non-for-profit subcommittee has been formed. We have Mr. Brockfeld and I are the Board of Finance reps. Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey is the Board of Selectmen rep, and we have a dedicated, 2 dedicated reps from the RTM. We have our first meeting on Thursday evening, which is good. We really want to get this started quickly. I've been doing a lot of personal research on this. We have 20 entities, if you will, not-for-profit entities that we fund today. As we know, some of them are what we would call mandatory, but they're still included in this 20. I reached out to all 20, and as of today, 9 of them had responded with detailed revenue, P&L kind of information that detailed their complete funding stream. So of those 9, I'm very confident that when we look at these things on Thursday night, these 9 entities that have, again, responded so far, we will get a really good picture of how we play in the whole structure of that organization. It's very eye-opening, I got to tell you. I've learned a lot in the last couple of weeks. I've also, with Mrs. Gardner and Mr. Hiller's help, reached out to the CFOs and budget directors for local communities. I was given Darien, Greenwich, Norwalk, Westport, New Canaan's budget directors and or CFOs. And I reached out to them and basically said, hey, what do you guys do? And they've all been very gracious and have responded back. Funny enough, they don't have documented processes either. So what I've offered back to them is, when we get one, because we are going to have one, I'll be happy to share it with you, and they've all been very responsive to that. And they've also provided me with their particular insights. Westport, for example, doesn't do this at all. No 501c3s. It's just not anything they do. The other communities do, and maybe not to the level that we commit, but they do donate to 501c3 entities. So we've got a lot of good background data. Our kickoff meeting on Thursday is going to be very much a kind of structuring of the subcommittee, how we're going to get through this, do we want to be providers to nonprofits? And if we do get past that small hurdle, then how do we really want to do it? So it's progressing, at least the research portion of it is progressing well, and I'll be happy to give you I'll keep you and Mr. Hiller updated just via email of what's going on, but until we meet for the first time, I'm a little bit limited in how much data I have for you right now.
That's great. Thank you. Mr. Kiley?
Hey, Chris, where is your meeting Thursday in case we want to come?
It's in the first floor of Independence Hall, the conference room.
7, 8?
Oh, 7 o'clock.
Thanks.
Sorry about that. Let me just check real quick.
Okay.
Thank you to your office for helping me set up the meetings as well, Mr. Tetro. Thursday, first floor conference room, Independence Hall, 7 p.m.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Anybody else? All right, before we go, we'll go on to item number 8, to hear and consider and act upon any communications. I don't have any. Do you, Mr. Heller? And to hear, consider, and act upon any other business which shall properly come before the board. Well, I don't have any. Mr. Tetra, I don't want to put you on the spot, but over the past few days, I've heard from a number of board members that are just questioning where everything now stands, given the 850 cut to contingency. And I've actually gotten quite a number of questions from the general public. And I just wanted to know if you wanted to not give us any specifics, unless you feel free to, but just tell us where that stands with you right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No specifics at this time, though I hope to, within the next week, have identified what adjustments we'll be making, but it's a difficult process to go through. Basically, the trade-off is, as we described earlier in the process, reducing 800 grand is a math problem. That's easy to do. Deciding what services you don't provide in order to deliver a reduced 800 grand is where the challenge is, and we've gone back and forth on that in a number of areas.
Okay, so nothing specific at this time. The other question some board members have asked is really, what role do we have to play in it? Because at some point, I think we're in uncharted, and I'm going to look to my well-tenured colleague here and say we're in uncharted territory as to this having happened before.
Right.
And I think the question arises, is there a role that the Board of Finance plays? What is that role? I don't have the answer to that. I'm honestly, I think it's something we should ask the town attorney, because we want to make sure we play whatever role we're supposed to play within this process. So
There's, I think, no question that at some point in the process, we'll be coming back. Basically, as we all know, the contingency item was cut. That's where we had proposed and putting the estimated settlements for union contracts. As those get settled, we'll have to make adjustments from some account to those. So we'll definitely have to come back before this body to make those transfers somewhere between now and the end of the year, based on when those settlements are. In the short term, to spend less than what's been appropriated in line items is not something that I think needs to be, as I understand it, approved ahead of time. But when we make those transfers, they do have to be.
Okay.
But in spite of that, as we identify where we're going to make those adjustments, we'll get back to this board and let you know that. So you'll be fully informed as to what we're looking at.
Does anybody have, Mr. DeWitt?
Just a mechanical question or anything else. There's really no budget line item that's sacred. I mean, you as First Selectman can pull from Board of Ed, and this is...
No, I cannot pull from the board. Board of Ed is sacred. That's it.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was fearful of, so that's... So you're basically with town departments and...
Yeah, and again,
Town
go back to the
departments.
drivers. You know, I can't, as you all know, and I realize I'm speaking to the choir here, the major drivers, we can decide to spend less on debt service. We can't. We have to fund that debt service.
Sure,
There's nothing we
sure.
can do to fund that less than that. OPEB, we've got a number for that. Legally, we can fund less than that. It would be fiscally irresponsible to do that. Pension, we could go back and fund less than that. We've had some talks. I realize we disagree on that level. I'm not going to cut that or propose underfunding that without coming back to this board and, in essence, coming up with a mutually agreeable solution. Let's go through, forgive me, some of the other items, but the drivers, as they're laid out, the difficulty with those numbers is how do you cut those? That was the challenge this year.
Sure.
So when it was proposed cutting the budget, there really was, you had to go to the all other category, look at the $25 million and realize every single dollar you cut comes out of that number. So the $800,000 is going to come out of that. Now, some of the categories in that $25 million we could cut and pretend we cut it. We can cut motor vehicle fuel for the police department and pretend we made a cut, but that's not a real cut. We can't have the police cars stopping in mid-chase because they ran out of gas. We can't cut electricity any more than the purchasing department already made a great buy on that, so I don't mean to misrepresent that, but we can't cut it below that number because we're going to spend that much. So it's all about coming up with a reasonable number, coming up with adjustments that we have a reasonable expectation that we can deliver on without hurting something else dramatically. We're not trying to cut maintenance that we don't think we can do without for a year. We're not trying to go back and cut technology just for the sake of cutting things that are hidden and won't show. We're not, on the other hand, we're not trying to go out of our way to do anything that will have an outrageous impact on the public either. We're trying to balance that. But there's no free lunch. To get $800,000 out of this budget, realize that when it was first proposed, if you look at the original budget driver sheet, that one sheet that laid everything out, the non-drivers came in at zero. So the department heads delivered on last year's number and said, we can live with that again, and that's where we have to take $800,000 out of it. All right, that based on the last run. When you look at the entire budget, what was presented to this board on February 16th was a $9.4 million increase. What sits in our budget right now is a $9.2 million increase. So everything we've done over the last 3 months has gotten us a $200,000 reduction. Now, to be fair, we have moved the chess pieces on the board just a little in certain categories. So it certainly is not the same budget that was delivered on February 16th, but it's effectively the same tax rate. Mr. Chair, if that helps by way of explanation.
I think it does.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions on that? All right, I think we are done. Can I have a motion? Mr. Bellitto, can I have a second? Okay, we'll go to Mr. Brown. All in favor of adjournment?
Okay, yeah.
Opposed? Abstentions? We're done. Thank you, everybody.
Opposed?